Hi everyone, Donna here. Welcome to today's video. It's lovely to see you. So in the last video, I did a 2-page spread. It was like a springtime Easter themed spread using my leftover elements from my muted Easter kit. What I'm showing you in today's video is how I stepped up that page. So the extra little things that I did to give more texture and interest to the page or to the elements on the page, like the tags and the journaling cards. So to keep it quite concise and easy to follow, I have split the video into, I think, 8 sections. So 8 different things that I did to step up, level up what was already there. Now, I feel these pages were absolutely fine the way they were. I could have left them, they would have been great. These are just little extra things to just add that interest, really, like I said. So the first thing I went about doing is inking. Now, I did ink at the time and I just went around the edges and added some definition. But in terms of inking in today's video, I'm adding quite a lot so that you can really see a colour difference between the original and the ink that I'm adding. It just adds a little bit of drama, lots more definition. And of course, this journaling card would have been absolutely fine the way it was. But you can see there, as I pop it back into the page, extra ink, which I've put on quite heavily, really helps it to stand out from the background. I do the back as well to get rid of that white, and again, I could have left it. It was absolutely fine the way it was. This just gives it that little bit extra, adds the extra colour and ties the whole thing in with the colours used on the pages. So that was pumice stone ink that I used. But I also decided to add some antique linen. This is the oxide. Stop that white from looking so stark, and just to finish the back of that journaling card off a little bit. The back is now much closer to the colours on the front. So the second thing I did was to add stenciling to my journaling card. So I have these kind of coffee splats, I suppose, ink splats, stencil. I can't remember where I got this from. It's really old. So I added some of those on. I just used whatever ink was left on this brush. So I actually don't know what it was. I'm guessing vintage photo. So I added some of that in, and then also some of these kind of grungy stains as well. And then I used from this textures kit by Lou Collins. This actually came in a magazine, and it's got this coffee ring stencil. So I also added that on using some walnut stain to make it a little bit darker. And in that kit as well, there's this alphabet stencil. So to give it a little bit of extra texture and detail, I've just very lightly went over with that. You can just lightly see it in the background. And I also repeated that step on the front as well to tie both sides together. I did it on the left and on the top right. Gives it that little bit of interest, but we're still getting that nice blank section in the middle. I'm showing you here again how it stands out now with those little extra things against the background. So the third thing I did was to use an embossing folder. Embossing folders give so much texture. I love embossing folders. I used this Daisy Field embossing folder by Honeybee Stamps, and it gave the most gorgeous texture on this card. And what I actually did was took some white pigment ink. This is Unicorn by Hero Arts, and with a brayer I lightly went over, and the ink picked up both raised areas to make it stand out a little bit more. And then I also went over with the pumice stone, and again the pumice stone picked up the raised areas and gave it even more definition. And I just love how this turned out. And this is what it looks like on the back as well, with the deboss side. Now the next thing I did was I added some stamping. So this was a very popular stamp kit from last year. It's the Mr. Rabbit by Stampers Anonymous and Tim Holtz. And I used some of these stamps to add some interest to the tag. Again, I used white pigment ink so it would show up over the darkness of the tag on the background. And I did choose to use a stamp positioner because white pigment ink can be quite thick and gloopy. So rather than putting a heavy amount down straight away, I just did lots of light layers and built that colour up. So I wanted to use a stamp positioner so that I could just stamp it as many times as I wanted to. But you can see there that the white pigment ink shows up really well on top of that background. And I just chose a selection of these stamps. Once I'd done this one, I decided to use the spotty one. And I put that in the top left corner. Stamped that down a few times using the stamping positioner. Pigment ink does take a while to dry, so you do need to give this a little bit of time so you don't smudge it. Then I just repositioned it and stamped it there, and I do actually decide that I want one more little dot that I couldn't reach with my stamping positioner, so I just did that one by hand. I didn't get a perfect impression, but that was fine. So obviously these stamps don't fit on here completely. I'm just choosing different sections of them to stamp down. And the third stamp, I just stamped the kind of top edge along the edge of the tag there. But you can just see the interest that it's given from just having that illustration in the background to now just having some texture and some fun and some pattern. Okay, so moving on to the next thing I did, which was to use texture paste. So I've got a normal white texture paste there. I've also got some of the shimmer relief paste from Altenew. Anything like that works well. And I've got a stencil that I found in a charity shop for 50p. And I'm going to use that to stencil through and add some detail onto that little kind of flip that I had there on the left-hand side of the page. Now, this would have been easier to do before I added it on, but it was absolutely no problem doing it afterwards. I just popped some kitchen paper down to protect the page underneath. There you can see I'm doing some diamonds in the top right. On the bottom left, I decided to do some kisses. And I also just took some pumice stone ink and inked around there a little bit as well to help the texture paste stand out against the background. Which leads me nicely on to the next thing that I did, which was to cause a happy accident. Now, I have an inkjet printer, so the ink reacts with the water. And I knew when I popped wet ink onto here, some of the blue on the outside edge of the kind of ticket there would run and mix a little bit. You can also see as well, some of that texture paste, with it being water-based, went a little bit pink in colour. And what that did was tie it into the page next to it, where I've got the blue stenciling in the background. And you can see I've got those slight blue and pink tinges that correspond well with the page next to it. Okay, so moving on, I thought a little bit more about tying the pages together. I've just talked about carrying colours from one page to another, and in the last video I used these little hole reinforcers on both pages to make a connection between the pages. There is also a label on the right hand side where it has that 17th of April stamp, and what I decided to do today is to add a similar label onto the left to create some continuity between those elements. And I also used some washi tape as well, popping a little bit on both sides. Again, just to help those pages work together. And as well as tying the pages together, those things as well lead nicely onto the final thing I want to talk about today, which is adding those little extra things such as accents and decorations to a page to fill in blank space, or just to give it that little bit of extra something. So you can see here I have a box of pre-made page tabs. I chose one that I thought fitted well in with the pages. I popped one on the right there, and this one on the left I didn't actually keep, but I'm just showing how I could also have added something on there to help lift that flap up. I'm also finding some elements from my file folder kit to add to these pages as well. So I've got a little bird element there that I'm going to stick down. I've got some labels as well. And what I actually decided to do is to pop some labels onto the background to add extra detail to the back of that belly band. And also I'm going to use one of those same style of labels on that flap, again for consistency and to tie the pages together. So I'm loving now on this belly band page, all those different layers, got all that different interest there. And of course this label on the left gives me somewhere to write a date or something if I want to do that. So I'm making sure this bird gets stuck down just kind of 2/3 along. I don't want to stick his tail because obviously I want to use him as a belly band. I did actually pop him a little bit too low. He should have gone up a little bit higher, so I might change him at some point. And I also added a little stamp there to finish everything off. So here are the 2 stepped up pages with all the extra details added to them. So we started off with the postcard and adding inking, stenciling, embossing to that. We then moved on to stamping onto the tag and adding lots of extra detail there. We then used our texture paste on the flap. And you'll notice as well with the white of the texture paste and the pigment ink, it ties in really nicely with the white space on the right hand side page. We then had the repetition of the circle on top of the tag with the circle on the page tab where I've got that little eyelet, and also the circle in the hole reinforcer. That all links in with the circles in the background. We've got the repetition of the colours, again with the white that I've just talked about, but also those pinks and blues coming through as well as having those little elements like the washi tape and the extra labels and the little ephemera bits like the stamp and the bird to add some extra details as well. So I'm really happy with the final result of this page. I hope I've been able to break down the different steps that I did clearly in this video for you. I think my favourite thing is the postcard with the embossed daisies. I really like how that came out. But all in all, I'm really happy with both pages. Thank you so much for joining me today. Take care of yourselves until next time, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.